On the 25th of April 1917, the British satirical magazine Punch ran an evocative political cartoon. In it, a stern Kaiser Wilhelm II, dressed in full regalia, stands before a young German army recruit. Pointing out the window to a giant factory belching black smoke, he declares, "And don't forget that your Kaiser will find a use for you, alive or dead." The ominous image referred to a disturbing rumour which had been circulating since the beginning of the Great War, that Germany, chronically short of fats and other raw materials, had taken to processing the corpses of its own fallen soldiers to produce soaps, candles, lubricants, explosives, and other vital war material. The facilities where this gruesome process was carried out, known as Kadaververtungsanstalten, or corpse factories, became symbolic of the brutality, callousness, and depravity of Imperial Germany, and did much to inspire the Allies to fight on until the end. There was only one problem. The corpse factories didn't actually exist. Starting as a morbid soldier's rumour and stoked by British and French propaganda, the corpse factory myth was a stark example of how a big enough lie, told often enough, can come to be accepted as truth. Hello everybody, just before we dive into today's video, I do want to talk to you about something that affects all of us in the digital world: data privacy. Have you ever Googled yourself and found your personal information online? You're like, that's not supposed to be public internet, what the hell? Well, now let me introduce you to our lifesaver today, and that's Aura, the sponsor of today's video, and they've got your back in ways that you can't even imagine. Aura is on a mission to protect you from online data brokers who profit off your info. These data brokers sell it to spammers, robocallers, basically anyone who wants to know where you live. But Aura can identify these data brokers and send them opt-out requests, forcing them to take your info down. And here's the cool part: Aura not only tackles data brokers, but is an all-in-one package for online security. Parental controls, antivirus, VPN, password management, you name it, they've got it, and it's all at an affordable price. Setting it up is a breeze, and trust me, you don't need a bunch of different apps. Let Aura do the heavy lifting so you can focus on what matters. So here's the deal: you can either let people continue to exploit and profit off your private information, or you can go to aura.com/todayIfoundout to start your 2-week free trial. The link is also in the description below. So if you want to keep those spammers at bay, click the link and give Aura a try. Thanks, Aura, for having our backs. And now back to today's video. This is the fascinating story of the Great War's biggest hoax. Rumours that Germans were rendering battlefield corpses to extract raw materials first began circulating in mid-1915, with British socialite lady Cynthia Asquith writing in a diary entry dated June the 16th, "Quite a pleasant dinner. We discussed the rumour that the Germans utilise even their corpses by converting them into glycerin with the byproduct of soap. I suggested that politician Richard Haldane should offer his vast body as raw material to Minister of Munitions David Lloyd George." Similar stories soon began to appear in British, American, and French newspapers. In 1916, Dutch cartoonist Louis Raymakers published a book of satirical cartoons, one of which depicted bodies of German soldiers being tied into neat bundles and loaded into a cart. The caption, written by British essayist Horace Varshell, claimed, "I am told by an eminent chemist that 6 pounds of glycerin can be extracted from the corpse of a fairly well-nourished Hun. These unfortunates, when alive, were driven ruthlessly to inevitable slaughter. They are sent as ruthlessly to the blast furnaces. 1 million dead men are resolved into 6 million pounds of glycerin." These rumours, however, largely died down until February the 26th, 1917, when the Shanghai newspaper, the North China Herald, reported on a meeting between Chinese President Feng Guozhang and German Admiral Paul von Hintze. It stated that the president was horrified when, quote, "the Admiralty triumphantly stated that they were extracting glycerin out of dead soldiers." Later on April the 10th, the England-based Belgian newspaper L'Indépendance Belge ran a lengthy article describing for the first time the location and operation of a corpse factory in grisly detail. "We have known for long that the Germans stripped their dead behind the firing line, fastened them into bundles of 3 or 4 bodies with iron wire, and then dispatched these grisly bundles to the rear, the chief factory of which has been constructed 1,000 yards from the railway connecting St. Vith near the Belgian frontier with Gerolstein in the lonely, little-frequented Eifel district southwest of Koblenz. The factory deals specially with the dead from the West Front. If the results are as good as the company hopes, another will be established to deal with corpses on the East Front. The trains arrive full of bare bodies, which are unloaded by the workers who live at the works. The men wear oilskin overalls and masks with mica eyepieces. They are equipped with long hooked poles and push the bundles of bodies to an endless chain, which picks them with big hooks attached at intervals of 2 feet. The bodies are transported on this endless chain into a long, narrow compartment where they pass through a bath which disinfects them. They then go through a drying chamber and finally are automatically carried into a digester or great cauldron in which they are dropped by an apparatus which detaches them from the chain. In the digester, they remain for 6 to 8 hours and are treated by steam which breaks them up while they are slowly stirred by machinery. 6 days later, the first English-language description of a corpse factory appeared in London Times and the Daily Mail. Titled Through German Eyes, the short article quoted from a piece in the German newspaper Berliner Lokalensinger, in which reporter Karl Rossner recounted, "We passed through Evigenichrot. There is a dull smell in the air, as if lime were being burnt. We're passing the great corpse utilization establishment of this army group. The fat that is won here is turned into lubricating oils, and everything else is ground down in the bones mill into a powder which is used for mixing with pig's food and as manure." From here, the story spread rapidly, with Rosner's account appearing in dozens of Allied newspapers, along with translations of the April the 10th L'Indépendance Belge article. By April the 30th, it had even reached the floor of the British House of Commons, where Robert Outhwaite, Member of Parliament for Hanley, asked, "May I ask if the noble lord is aware that the circulation of these reports has caused anxiety and misery to British people who have lost their sons on the battlefield and who think that their bodies may be put to purpose? And does not that give a reason why he should try to find out the truth of what is happening in Germany?" Officially, the government stated that it had no evidence to either confirm or deny the rumours and refused to endorse the story. However, Lord Robert Cecil, Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, rather pointedly admitted that, in view of other actions by German military authorities, there is nothing incredible in the present charge against them. I confess I am not able to attach very great importance to any statements made by the German government. This tacit but unofficial endorsement only helped to fan the flames, and the story continued to circulate throughout the Allied powers, especially the United States, which had just entered the war. One of the most widely read accounts was the anonymously written pamphlet A Corpse Conversion Factory, A Peep Behind the German Lines, published by Darling & Son in mid-1917. The story was a propagandist's dream, not only painting the Germans in a suitably barbaric light, but indicating that the British naval blockade of German ports, the cause of the nation's severe fat and glycerin shortages, was having the intended effect. Indeed, despite the frequent protestations of the German government, the story was widely believed up until the end of the war, which, along with other better documented German atrocities, likely influenced the harsh terms imposed on Germany by the 1919 Treaty of Versailles. With the end of the war, the story soon faded from the public consciousness, only to dramatically re-emerge nearly a decade later. On October 26, 1925, the New York Times reported that Brigadier John Charteris, Conservative MP and former head of British military intelligence, had admitted to fabricating the entire story. Charteris, who was speaking at a private dinner of the National Arts Club in New York City, allegedly stated that the hoax had been concocted in early 1917 to get China to join the war against Germany. Stumbling upon two photographs, one showing the bodies of German soldiers being gathered for burial and another showing a train car full of horse carcasses bound for processing into fertilizer, Charteris had swapped the captions to make it seem like the Germans were processing their own dead soldiers. He then dispatched the photographs to various Chinese newspapers and let the story grow from there. An underling even suggested forging the diary of a German soldier to fully sell the ruse, but this idea was rejected. In any case, this clever piece of black propaganda ultimately proved effective, for on August 14, 1917, China joined the war on the side of the Allies. Indeed, when the corpse factory story first began to circulate, the German government immediately suspected it was the product of accidental or deliberate mistranslation. In German, the word cadaver refers to the carcasses of animals and not human bodies, which are instead known as Leichnam. On May 11, 1917, one day after the detailed corpse factory article appeared in L'Indépendance Belge, Foreign Secretary Arthur Zimmermann addressed the German Reichstag, or Parliament, claiming no reasonable person among our enemies can have been in any uncertainty about the fact that this has to do with the bodies of animals and not of human beings. The fact that the word cadaver in French is used for human beings and animals has been exploited by our enemies. We have rectified this subtle misunderstanding, which, against its better knowledge, has been used by the enemy press to mislead public opinion. In neutral countries, insofar as there is a tangible, slanderous intention, criminal proceedings will be taken. Several Allied newspapers, including the French Paris Midi and the American New York Times, also clued in on the mistranslation and thus refused to credit the story. Several others also suggested that the whole story was an April Fool's joke, a long-held tradition of German newspapers. Similarly, in June 1917, the London Times published a captured German army order which made reference to the cadaver factory. The order was was given by an organization abbreviated as VSDOK, which the Times interpreted as Verdungungsteller, or Instructions Department. Soon after, however, the German newspaper Frankfurter Zeitung revealed that it actually stood for Veterinary Station, further suggesting that the Germans were processing horse carcasses, not human bodies. Charteris's alleged confession caused outrage in Britain and Germany, with key government figures like Charles Masterman, former head of the War Propaganda Bureau, also denying that the story was a deliberate fabrication. We certainly did not accept the story as true, and I know nobody in official positions at the time who credited it. Nothing suspect as this was made use of in our propaganda. Only such information as had been properly verified was circulated. Brigadier Charteris himself claimed that he had been misquoted, explaining that certain suggestions and speculations as regards to the origin of the cadaver story, which have already been published in Bertrand Russell's book and elsewhere, which I repeated, are doubtless unintentionally, but nevertheless unfortunately turned into definite statements of fact and attributed to me. Lest there should still be any doubt, let me say that I neither invented the cadaver story, nor did I alter the captions in any photograph, nor did I use any faked material for propaganda purposes. The allegations that I did so are not only incorrect, but absurd. The book Charteris referred to is Those Eventful Years by philosopher Bertrand Russell, in which he speculated that any fact which had a propaganda value was seized upon, not always with strict regard for truth. For example, worldwide publicity was given to the statement that the Germans boiled down human corpses in order to extract from them gelatin and other useful substances. This story was widely used in China when that country's participation was desired because it was hoped that it would shock the well-known Chinese reverence for the dead. The story was set going cynically by one of the employees in the British propaganda department, a man with a good knowledge of German, perfectly well aware that cadaver means carcass, not corpse. Despite these vehement denials, the revelation that the feared corpse factories were a complete hoax angered the British public, with the Richmond Times-Dispatch reporting on December 6, 1925, "A few years ago, the story of how the Kaiser was reducing human corpses to fat aroused the citizens of this and other enlightened nations to a fury of hatred. Normally sane men doubled their fists and rushed off to the nearest recruiting sergeants. Now they are being told, in effect, that they were dupes and fools, that their own officers deliberately goaded them to the desired boiling point using an infamous lie to arouse them. In the next war, the propaganda must be more subtle and clever than the best the World War produced." These frank admissions of wholesale lying on the part of trust and governments in the last war will not soon be forgotten. While the London Evening Standard demanded, it is vital that he deny the statement instantly. Its effect is to discredit British propaganda, past, present and future. In Germany, fury over the corpse factory hoax reached such a pitch that in December 1925, British Foreign Secretary Austen Chamberlain was forced to issue an official statement that said there was no truth to the story. But if the hoax didn't originate with Charteris, where then did it come from? Despite the British government's denials, it is possible that the hoax was at least partially propagated by British military intelligence and the War Propaganda Bureau. Indeed, during the war, both organizations employed large numbers of established or up-and-coming writers, including John Buchan, author of The 39 Steps, and the Winnie the Pooh creator A.A. Milne, who in 1918 penned the following poem. In M17B, who loves to lie with me, about atrocities and hung corpse factories, come hither, come hither, come hither. Here we shall see no enemy, but sit all day and blather. Later, another member of M17, Major Hugh Pollard, would claim that he invented the corpse factory myth to amuse his cousin. Most modern historians, however, doubt that the corpse factory story was deliberately concocted, with propaganda historian Randall Martin speculating that the real source for the story is to be found in the pages of the newspapers owned by Lord Northcliffe. The corpse rendering factory was not an invention of a diabolical propagandist, it was a popular folktale, an urban myth, which had been circulating for months before it received any official notice. This is not to say, however, that the story wasn't occasionally embellished and circulated by official sources as a convenient piece of propaganda. For example, an official investigation conducted in 1925 revealed that in 1917, the German newspaper Berliner Lokalanzeiger had reported on the discovery of a railway carriage filled with dead German soldiers destined for Liege in Belgium, but which was accidentally diverted to the Netherlands. A Belgian newspaper immediately picked up the story, but deliberately distorted it to suggest that the bodies were destined for a soap factory. This deliberate lie forms the basis for the infamous article in L'Indépendance Belge. While today the corpse factory hoax might seem like a laughable story from a more gullible time and a trivial event in a war that claimed nearly 40 million lives, this particular piece of propaganda would go on to have tragic real-world consequences. When the Second World War broke out and the first reports of the Nazi Holocaust began to leak out of Germany, lingering doubts over alleged German atrocities during the previous war led many to dismiss these new allegations. This was especially true of rumors that the Nazis were processing the bodies of concentration camp victims into soap and other goods, with the American magazine The Christian Century reporting in 1942. The parallel between this story and the corpse factory atrocity tale of the First World War is too striking to be overlooked. Indeed, according to historian Joachim Neander, there can be no doubt that the reported commercial use of the corpses of the murdered Jews undermines the credibility of the news coming from Poland and delayed action that might have rescued many Jewish lives. Even after the Nazis surrendered and Allied troops entered the death camps, many still refused to accept the true horrific scale of the Holocaust. This refusal persists to this day, with the widely believed but now thoroughly debunked myth of death camp victims being rendered into soap being one of the favorite rhetorical devices used by Holocaust deniers. It is a chilling reminder of the very real and very dangerous power of misinformation.